This is TWIS, This Week in Science, episode number 879, recorded on Wednesday, June 8th, 2022. Oceans of Science on Ocean Day. I'm Dr. Kiki, and tonight on the show, we will fill your head with lava life, zinc requirements, and ugly fish. But first, thanks to our amazing Patreon sponsors for their generous support of TWIS. You can become a part of the Patreon community at patreon.com/thisweekinscience.
Disclaimer. The world is going to hell in a handbasket, but there are things we can do to prevent it. We need the willpower. That's it. Just the willpower to do it. We can halt the rise of carbons in the atmosphere that threaten our cities, our food sources, and the intricate web of every living creature on the planet, if we have the willpower to make some changes. We can reduce gun deaths, homelessness, poverty, and hatred if we have the willpower to make some changes. We can overcome illness, manage pathologies, cure diseases if we have the willpower to make some changes. The changes aren't impossible. They actually aren't even hard. The changes we need to reach a sustainable, healthy, secure future are already available to us. We just lack the willpower to act, to do, to engage. And actually, that's not even true. Willpower has nothing to do with it. We lack the knowledge of how to act, how to do, and how to engage. And actually, again, that's also not entirely true, because we have the knowledge of how to act, how to do, and how to engage. We have the results of policies around the nation and from around the world over all of history. We know the outcomes of actions. We know the outcomes of change. And we know the outcome of our status quo as well. If you're not concerned with the threat of the status quo, if you aren't activated to do some form of activism, if you are not interested, if you do not care, you have not been listening to This Week in Science. Coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind I can't get enough. I want to learn everything. I want to fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I want to know what's happening. What's happening? What's happening this week in science? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening this week in science?
Good science to you, Kiki and Blair.
And a good science to you too, Justin, Blair, and everyone out there. Welcome to another episode of This Week in Science on World Oceans Day. The sounds.
Instead of wooing,
Giving us the sounds of the ocean. Yes. I like
just put
it.
your ear up to a nice conch.
You're
Hear
still
the-
just focused on the foamy waves on the edges. The ocean is so much bigger than you imagine.
So much.
Some places it sounds like
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
it's underwater.
Okay.
It sounds like that, right?
Okay. Well,
The
that's...
majority of it sounds
This
like
is
that.
all very exciting. What if it also sounded a little bit like this?
Is that
There,
a wave
you're looking
harp?
You're looking a little skeptical.
I know the wave organs exist. Is that a wave harp? Is that what that is?
No, so what we are listening to right now is some music that was created mathematically
Oh, sure.
by translating visual satellite images taken by NASA into layers of ocean color data, and different colors in these satellite images were coded as different parts of the scale and different instruments. And so what this particular sound of the sea is the work of these musicians, a Goddard scientist, was a co-creator, also Ryan Vandermeulen. And this particular one is Rio de la Plata, and it's the sound of a large river entering a large ocean.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
They've,
that's about as convoluted a way to get to that music as they possibly could have found.
Yeah, but it's kind of fun. They took it's all data. So this is visual image data that's been transcoded into music to create these, as Vandermeulen calls it, oceanographic symphonic experiences.
Yeah, and it's amazing how like the Western octave that data happened to fall into, I guess.
Oh yes,
Yeah,
no, I'm
it's
sure
amazing how that
they
just
Yeah.
happened.
they
Yes.
they
it's really-
assigned the various values to things within a specific scale, and probably
Yes.
within that even specific chords,
Yes,
Mhm.
exactly.
so that
To
it
make
sounded
it
good for sure.
so it sounds nice. Yes. As
It's if
opposed
you
to-
removed every key on the piano except for those in a very specific set, you could make some really beautiful music too.
Yeah, stop it.
But we've talked before about creating sound from different data sets, and people have been trying to make auditory versions of data from the LHC. They've been trying to create, all sorts of auditory ways of imagining things like proteins, and this is another twist
And
on
I've
that.
never
why
liked
not?
it anytime that they've ever attempted to do any of these things. I just
You just
find
need
it.
to look at it different. Just instead of the ocean made some beautiful music. No. The scientists made some beautiful music with data
Yes.
that they got from the ocean. That is a
Okay.
different, it's a different
Yeah.
spin that perhaps you might enjoy it more. I think it took some beautiful scientific knowledge and some really great musical knowledge to make that piece of art. I think that's neat.
This piece that's playing in the background right now is a piece of the Bering Sea that's representative of photosynthetic bacteria. So we've got blue is the ocean, which is the first base. So this piece that I'm bringing in right
I
now,
like it.
this is the Bering Sea, and it is representative of the blue of the ocean, the green light that emerges from the ocean from the photosynthetic bacteria that's in it. There's also this flute, which is red light that also comes from the ocean. It's reflected from the ocean. So we've got these three instruments, three scales, giving us a visual picture of life in the ocean on our planet Earth. On this Earth Day. Now you can do your dancing, Justin.
I feel like I'm in a waiting room that I've been waiting in for a long time, and it's not even anything I want to wait for.
It's not your music. That's okay. I think it's very neat. They involved so John Vandermeulen is Dr. Vandermeulen's brother, and he's a programmer and has experience in digital music production, and so helped to do the programming. And they actually made a lot of this on GarageBand, so not even
Lovely.
using super high tech equipment. So it's anybody could figure out how to do these things. NASA has released a bunch of these videos and these musical productions online, so you can go find them wherever you like looking for NASA things.
I'd love to
Music.
hear that in a spa. I think it would be great.
Yes, it would be really nice, relaxing spa music. Oh my goodness. But that was like this whole thing of ocean music, and we are here to talk about science, right? So what are we going to talk about today? We have a great show ahead. I have kombucha on Mars. I've got zinc in the oceans, bacterial brain death, and Fungeyes. What do you have, Justin?
I've got living in the bad place. Some just good news. Just good news about life. Good news about life. And a couple of stories about crime. I guess one story about crime stopping, and one story that that what you believe in may determine how long you live.
May. I believe I will live forever, right,
I
Blair? We're
believe
gonna
in
go
modern medicine. Is that?
believe I
That's
can
gonna help.
fly.
That's gonna help. Yeah, actually.
Yeah.
I
You have to
believe
stay
I can
tuned
touch
for that
the
one. It's a
sky.
teaser.
Yep.
Uh-huh.
Okay, Blair, what's in the animal corner?
Oh, I just have a whole bunch of World Oceans Day fun, and then to kick off the show, I have some non-animal news about women and children. So there you go.
They're animals. We're animals.
Yes, they certainly are. We're a particular kind.
A subset of Animalia. Yes.
Human animals. But then later on, we'll really get into the salt water.
Let's get into the salt water. Go
Mhm.
swimming with the ugly fishes. As we're jumping into the show, I want to remind everyone that if you are not yet subscribed to This Week in Science, you can find us all places that podcasts are found. Look for This Week in Science. We broadcast live streaming weekly on Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Pacific time on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. You can find us also as TWIS Science, TWISCIENCE on Twitch, Twitter, and Instagram. Our website is twis.org if all of this gets to be too much for you. But if you haven't done so yet, click whatever subscribe button is where you are right now and make sure to sign up for notifications. Science time? Or should I play
Science
more
time.
NASA?
No.
NASA
Let's get
Do
to
both. Play the
Type
music in the
90.
background.
Remember
Give
we were
us
talking
the
about
science.
doing like a fast and efficient show at some point.
All right. Well, Justin, you want to take us to the bad place, but I want to give us some good news. So earlier this week, there was news of a very intriguing study suggesting that there is a treatment for rectal cancer that has resulted in complete remission of the patients who have been treated by this therapy. Matt Stafford sent an email and said, I know you don't normally cover covering cancer stuff because, as we've said for years and years and years, it's that there's no cure. There's so many different forms of the disease. It's all just out there, right?
Although actually, I feel like more recently we've been doing them because it's been, hey, we have results where it cured a cancer. There's another cancer that's being cured. Where before it was like, oh yeah, opening the pathway to the doorway to the secret hatch will allow us to take a pathway to get a secret, like MacGuffin after MacGuffin.
That's exactly it. So what we've ended up with this week is out of Memorial Sloan Kettering Hospital, this trial that was published in the New England Journal of Medicine this last week of 12 subjects who were treated using an immunotherapy treatment for rectal cancer. They did not receive chemotherapy, radiation, or any other type of regular cancer therapy. And the immunotherapy, they've been cancer-free. The tumors disappeared, been cancer-free for 2 years. So in this small group of people, this has worked. Why was this so successful? This method is specifically looking at a very small proportion of a subset of the population of people who get rectal cancer. Within a group of people, there is a particular mutation that changes the way that corrections can be made. There's a mismatch. Things don't line up and they don't get corrected. But they were able to address that with this immunotherapy that basically goes in and tells the immune cells, no, those are cancer cells. Go kill them. And because the cancer cells, by the time this immunotherapy has been given, have like grown really big and there's a lot of them and they're like, rah, I'm a big cancer cell. Don't look at me. But the immune cells, because of this immunotherapy, they get the blindfold taken off and they go, psh, you were tricking me. Now I'm going to get you. And they just take them all out and the cancer disappears. And in the reports, they said that some people within just 2 or 3 of the immunotherapy sessions, which were given about 3 weeks apart for 6 months, just within the first 2 or 3 therapy sessions, the tumors started to have a reduction in size, and they started to see a reversal of their symptoms that had sent them to the hospital, to the doctors in the first place. So that's just one. And there were 2 other stories this week as well. Another one related to the BRCA2 gene, where some people who have breast cancer, they have a BRCA2 low is the gene. So they've got the BRCA2 gene, but they've only got a very small quantity of the mutations in their genes. So not all of the cancerous cells express the BRCA2 phenotype. It's a very low proportion. So they're within this very, very small, again, subset genomic. It's a small group of people, a small genomic subset of the people who get breast cancer and who are even smaller than the group that have the BRCA gene. And with this particular treatment, again and in New England Journal of Medicine, but all three studies were actually published in the New England Journal of Medicine this last week. And what it ended up doing was leading to the ability of chemotherapy to be able to treat the breast cancer. So previously untreatable breast cancer was suddenly treatable. And then the third one was pancreatic cancer, which can be, it's incredibly deadly. And a patient with progressive metastatic pancreatic cancer was treated with a single infusion of autologous T cells that had been genetically engineered. And so those genetically engineered T cells went and targeted the tumors. And the patient is in remission, complete remission as a result. The thing that all three of these studies have in common is genomics and the application of understanding the mutations that are in play and being able to target therapies directly at those mutations. This is the future of cancer treatment.
And the present.
And the present! It's happening right now!
It's happening now.
It's back to that idea of very personalized healthcare, right? And I think that's definitely where we're going. It's very cool. I will just throw out there again, if this really works, this is great. I'm super psyched at the idea of taking care of cancer one by one and figuring it all out. I don't know where we're going to put all these people. That is the thing that, like, especially talking about World Oceans Day, right? And about environmental disaster and about the human population. Mm-hmm. This is the conversation we had when I first joined the show, too. Like, I super, on an individual level, I want each sick person to live forever. I want that to happen.
Yes.
But there's always
a population
part of me that's
level.
like, this was a big population control. And yes, I understand if you have been touched by someone with cancer, that's a mean thing to say. And I get that. And I don't want, knowing an individual, I don't want any individual to get cancer. There is this systems thinking that I'm always having that's, where are we going to put all these people? This is the conversation we're going to have this modern baby.
And then we're just going to have aging populations, Blair.
Yeah,
there's going to be a bunch of old people kicking around the old folks' home. You know, it's going to be great.
As somebody with cancer, I can tell you, I'm all for all the cures that they're finding. I find those extremely important.
I totally agree with you. Completely. I just don't know where we're going to put all these people.
Because the results are in. The results are in again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it looks like we are all living in the bad place.
No.
Carbon levels
you don't want to be in the bad place.
Carbon levels in the atmosphere have reached an all-time high, as they probably have been doing every couple of years now. But carbon dioxide measured at NOAA's Mauna Loa Atmospheric Baseline Observatory peaked for 2022 at 421 parts per million this last month, pushing the atmosphere further into territory not seen for millions of years. Millions of years is a mighty long time, but what's most strikingly is how quickly we've now gotten to these increased levels. So, how long ago do you think it was the last time that we were at the over 420 million parts per million air in the atmosphere?
Not million parts per million.
Parts per million.
420
parts per million.
Yeah.
I remember there being mammoths for sure.
Oh, it might even be before 4.5 million years ago. Is the last time we were over 400 parts per million.
All right.
420. So Yeah, so let's put this in a little context. So prior to the Industrial Revolution, CO2 levels were consistently around 280 parts per million. That's for the sort of thousands of years of civilization. This is when we invented agriculture, decided where we would want to live, what we would be eating, and how we would be getting along with each other on the planet. At 280 parts per million. A few hundred years later, Industrial Revolution, all this, 420, over 420 parts per million. 50% increase. Well, what were things like that 4.5 million years ago when we were over the 400 parts per million? Let's step back, shall we, into the days of yesteryear. And those good old days, the sea levels varied between 5 and 25 meters higher than they are today. So a meter, if you're not familiar, is 3 times its weight in feet.
Ish.
Yeah, or the other way around. Yeah, so you got 5 meters would be a 15-foot sea level rise.
Ish. Yeah.
25 meters would be about 75-ish meters of sea level rise. There's this fun site, too, that you can go to that shows the effects of sea level rise over time. And it only goes up 10 feet. So it doesn't even get sort of like to the minimum of where this carbon level indicates we could be headed quickly. So anyway, that's high enough to write an entire Atlantis-like mythology around many of the world's largest modern cities going forward. Temperatures way back then averaged 7 degrees Fahrenheit higher. Large forests covered what we consider Arctic tundra today. And according to NOAA Administrator Rick Spinred, the science is irrefutable. Humans are altering our climate in ways that our economy and our infrastructure must adapt to. We can see the impacts of climate change around us every day. The relentless increase of carbon dioxide measured at Mauna Loa is a stark reminder that we need to take urgent, serious steps to become a more climate-ready nation.
Yeah, if I can kind of take what I was talking about before and fold it into this, I think the main takeaway that I have is if we could take the same amazing technology that we are putting towards medical care, because everyone can agree we don't want sick people, and apply that same lens to how we get energy, we could actually do a lot of good and accommodate rising populations, longer lived populations, and greater energy requirements without doing this to our planet. But there's this disconnect, right? Where it's, again, everyone can agree illness is bad. For the most part, most people can agree that we want to fix illness. You're right. This is 2022. I gotta adjust. But the energy conversation has been skewed to become politicized and biased and all this kind of stuff. And so it's not just a simple, okay, we have to make this world a place where we can inhabit and grow and thrive for the future, recognizing what our future looks like. And this is the part of climate change information that is often left out, is when you talk about, oh, that's way in the future, oh, it's not real, oh, it's a political argument, people don't want big oil, all this kind of stuff. No, this is real life impacts on real life people that we are currently seeing and will very quickly see in the future. And that's why sea level rise maps are tough, because there's a million variables and it's really hard to say, okay, this is exactly what you're going to see if this, then that. But it's the visualization that you need to kind of bring people down to earth and recognize that this is
and oddly, that map that you're looking at there, Kiki, is only it only goes up to 10 feet, but it also doesn't. It's only in the United States that they've got it. They show the whole world map.
Only the U.S. is going to be affected. Apparently,
it's the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association.
They don't care what happens elsewhere. Yeah.
They'll all be fine. Let's just all move to Canada.
Everyone will be just fine.
They'll be fine. Anyway, I was filibustering, but essentially this show, We need to adjust how we make energy. That's all I'm saying.
Well, but the silver
We
lining,
do.
though,
We
the
need to
silver
shift
lining
Yeah.
Yes.
is, of course, according to, just even at 10 feet, but especially if once it gets over 10 feet of sea rise, no more Florida.
No, but that's physical space where we can't put people anymore. That's a problem.
Yeah, but it's a
Reducing
physical
space.
space that seems to have collected people as a block.
But then you want to put
Okay,
them in
that's
other
enough.
places. They're not going away.
No, I think they're stubborn
No.
enough not to move. I think it'll be self-correcting.
Yeah, but hey, thanks to the ocean for being the sponge for all this carbon dioxide that we have been releasing into the atmosphere for so long. I mean, that's what our oceans do, right? We have ocean acidification because we've been releasing too much carbon dioxide.
More of that in the animal corner.
Yes, more to come. Blair,
Yeah,
we've been shouting at each other a little
we
bit.
sure have. Yeah,
Is there a bit of noise pollution going on here?
Yeah.
How is this going to affect everybody?
it's bad for the children.
Okay, like me. No.
This is a study from Barcelona Institute for Global Health, and they wanted to look at 38 schools in Barcelona, and the noise inside and outside of the classroom and how that impacts development of working memory and attention in primary school students. They looked at 2,680 children between 7 and 10 years of age. They looked at 2 abilities that develop rapidly during pre-adolescence and are essential for learning and school attainment. Attention, which is looking at selectively attending to specific stimuli or focusing on a specific task. Difficult for any human these days, but especially children. And then working memory is the system that allows us to hold information in the mind and manipulate it over a short period of time. They looked over a 12-month period at cognitive tests, and they wanted to see the change over time because children are learning very rapidly at this age. They also took noise measurements in the 38 schools outside, in the playgrounds, and inside the classroom. And what they found is a noisier classroom is harder for children. It impacts this memory, this attention, and as little as a 5 decibel increase in outdoor noise impacted working memory. Made it 11% slower than average, and it made working memory, the complex side of working memory, which is when we use the information that we're storing in working memory and kind of use it over time. That was 23% slower than average. Exposure to 5 decibels of outdoor traffic noise also resulted in attention capacity that was about 5% slower than average. So everything was impacted by noise. They also did test based on neighborhood data, how loud it was in these individual students' neighborhoods. They didn't go measure their individual house, but they measured by neighborhood. And there was no association between residential noise and cognitive development. It was only in the school. So they think that's because school time is when they're having these intense windows of concentration and they're actively trying to learn. And so that is when the noise pollution really gets to them. And I brought this study more just to remind us all that humans are animals, and we've talked about noise pollution with animal species a bunch of times, but we haven't really talked about it in relation to humans, and specifically children who are impacted by noise pollution.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the really important point is we talk about, how are all of our urban sounds affecting birds? How are the sounds we make in the oceans affecting whales? But we're not talking about how those environments, I mean, underwater isn't where humans usually are for the large part, but in our urban environments, what impact does noise make on our abilities?
And then also, if you want to get really intense about it, this was not part of this study, but I'm willing to bet money that at least in the United States, if you looked at what schools were the noisiest, it's usually inner cities, urban areas, probably public schools before private schools that are in kind of quieter suburban areas.
Right.
So that can impact specific socioeconomic levels.
Yep.
In some places, there's actually a specific ethnical change, right? That you have specific ethnicity-based change. I can't find the right word. But yes, you'll find certain demographics, that's a better word for this, that are put in certain schools in certain areas, whether that's supposed to be the case or not. And if those are more often the loud, busiest parts of the city, that could impact academic performance, which later impacts funding, which later impacts all sorts of things. So I'll just throw out there as an extra.
So I'm
kind
just
of thing
wondering,
to
though.
think about.
I'm just wondering what makes the teachers so much worse at teaching once it's loud. Are they just distractible folk? Are people who become teachers like the quiet type people who like?
That's not what it is.
I feel like that might be it. I feel like it might just be the teachers get stressed
Blame the
out by the
teachers.
noise.
Yeah. Great. All the
Sure,
teachers
sure,
listening
sure.
right now are gonna love that.
Hey,
take.
Noise can't be good for them either, but
No,
this study was
I'm
about the students'
The students.
performance on tests,
Yeah.
so that's the data we have. And
Like,
this
I
is
bet
in
the band
Barcelona.
teacher isn't
It wasn't
affected.
even in the United States, so you could also throw that variable in there. But it's I would say this is an opportunity to look at those things.
Band teacher probably doesn't even know there is noise outside.
Oh, of course not. They're hard of hearing. I mean, that's why I can't hear very well at all. It's because I sat in front of the tuba player for 10 years. So it's,
Oompa, oompa, oompa. Oh! But do you like drinking kombucha?
No.
No.
Justin, no NASA space music. No kombucha. No interpretive dance. Claire, are you a kombucha drinker?
No, I don't like the muck.
This team is not big on kombucha, but I know there are a bunch of people out there in the world who enjoy it. Well, kombucha has the mother, right? This is the bacteria and yeast combination.
Is that the SCOBY?
That ferments.
Is that what that is? Okay.
Yes, the mother, the SCOBY, the microbial life that allows for the fermentation, that allows for the kombucha to be the beverage that people decide to drink. Some people call it tea fungus, mushroom tea. Just
because you give it that red tea and sugar to feed it, and then you get the big pellet floating on the top there.
Yeah,
and it's terrible.
It's published this week in Frontiers in Microbiology, some international researchers, including the University of Göttingen. I don't know, Göttingen. I'm not pronouncing that correctly, and I apologize.
Make all the consonants vowels and all the vowels consonants. You'll have it perfect.
Anyway, these researchers sent kombucha cultures to the International Space Station, and they wanted to find out how robust kombucha microbes actually are, and whether or not cellulose in particular can be a biomarker for robust biomarker. So they sent it up to space, brought it back down after 1.5 years in simulated Mars-like conditions. So up not just to the International Space Station, but simulated Mars on the International Space Station. And then they let them sit and cultivate for a couple of years, and then they decided to see if they could reactivate them after 2.5 years, and they found that those microbial species that contained bacterial cellulose survived, whereas those without cellulose did not. This suggests that microbes with cellulose could live on Mars, but it also suggests that bacterial cellulose could be a biomarker, which means a signal for extraterrestrial life that we look for on other planets and moons. in the universe. Anyway, yeah, kombucha on Mars, or at least part of the SCOBY will make it to Mars anyway, the cellulose part. Bet you didn't know if you're drinking kombucha that your kombucha could survive in space.
That makes sense. It looks like an alien.
Well, and it'll probably have good company once it gets there.
Tardigrades.
So, that too.
What kind
So
of
I've
company,
got-
Justin?
So,
Yeah.
Just Good News is the Just Good News science news segment that seeks out the good news despite the future being completely entirely doomed. Origin of Life edition. Life. Question is it uniquely an Earthling-oriented fluke occurrence? An intergalactic oopsie of one-off chemistry, an unlikely, improbable even, freak outlier in a universe big enough to run the numbers on odds till the nil to impossible actually happens? Or is it something so basic, so natural to the underpinning of chemistry in our universe that it is likely to be absolutely everywhere? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think?
Everywhere. It's everywhere. It's everywhere.
You like the everywhere?
Except when
What
it
do you
dies.
think? Where?
Yeah. It's
You're
it's
going
out there.
everywhere?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess you guys got it right. That's the correct answer. Ding, ding, ding. So, this is scientists at the Foundation for Applied Molecular Evolution have made a discovery that may have answered our question about that once and for all. First, the premise of the debate, the structure of RNA is sort of considered the underpinning. You kind of have to have the RNA structure before you even get to a DNA structure, because RNA is like half a DNA. How do you get it's the building block for a DNA in the first place. And they've been looking at how these molecules might form, and we've had all sorts of laboratories get those base components and some chemistry in some very synthetic ways, and adding electricity and trying to recreate the way that life may have formed. So this RNA was found to spontaneously form on basalt lava glass. This is published online in the journal Astrobiology. Lisa Biondi, the lead researcher. Study shows that long RNA molecules, 100 to 200 nucleotides in length, form when you do nothing more than when these nucleoside triphosphates do nothing more than percolate through basaltic glass. This is glass that would have been abundant on the Earth 4.35 billion years ago, and similar results of this antiquity survive today on Mars. Because of what the basalts are made of and how they form, this lava glass rock is likely everywhere that has planets with water and volcanic activity. Since there's no indication of weird physics or different chemistry in other solar systems or in other galaxies, life and the building blocks for the existence of life are likely freaking everywhere out there. Like everywhere.
Anywhere that has so anywhere with volcanic activity or the conditions that could lead to the glassification of these basaltic rocks.
Yeah. So this is bonded
But
RNA.
it's not just basalt, right? It's the glass, like the glassy form, like this.
Right. Yeah, this is what they found that it is forming on, just naturally percolating from it. So this is the bonded RNA, though, not the fully double helical DNA that makes up advanced life. And debate about the status of RNA viruses being a life form aside. The double helix is a lot like any of the other discussions on life. We live on a planet where we are adapted to so it seems like this can be meant for us. If we weren't adapted to it, we wouldn't be here. The double helix is the stable adaptation of RNA. It's a structure that in a solution is bound and wound in such ways that it can't get pulled apart in either direction. This way, lengthwise, it still stays together. That doesn't mean there's a persistence towards it in any form of evolution, but the fact that once it's together, it's hard to separate makes it the thing that's adapted and makes it the thing that persists. So that structure of double helical DNA, very much like ours, also then could very likely be throughout the. So it's not just viruses throughout the universe. It could be life.
But this does, being the RNA synthesis on these rocks, though, I mean, that does kind of support the RNA hypothesis, right, where RNA life is
Yeah.
maybe the primary stepping stone, and then maybe to the more complex DNA, and
Yeah.
so
But some of those building block steps those also are involved in this. So the impacts into that early stage Earth also would have delivered nickel, which the team showed gives the nucleoside triphosphates from nucleosides, and they give them an activated phosphate is added into this. Also, if there's borate, borax, also part of the basalt, controls the formation of those triphosphates. So, like, all of the basic chemistry is there in an early planetary form.
right.
The beauty of this too is this method is so uncomplicated. They can actually create a high schooler with ruler recreation for the classroom.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I think those are going to be experiments that high school science teachers are going to be using. College science teachers also, but that's amazing. That's a really neat demonstration.
RNA from nature.
Yeah,
I'm gonna do it at home.
Spontaneous generation. Yeah, and I said basalt earlier, and I meant like the igneous rocks that get turned into the basalt. But yeah, anyway, I misspoke. But lava rocks, lava life. It's true. We need heat. We need fire for life. We also need zinc for life in our polar oceans, according to a new study that has just been published in Nature, Ecology, and Evolution. 46 researchers, international team, 5 countries came together, and we're looking at levels of nutrients, levels of compounds in the polar oceans to determine how the ecosystems got started and what maintains ecosystems. And so their findings showed that the polar oceans, they're very, very productive, but they would not be if they didn't have zinc. Zinc, which is like it's when you take a supplement, it's like the last thing on the list and you're like, oh, zinc. Does it have zinc? Okay, it's got zinc, whatever. We don't really think about it. But in terms of the nutrition for photosynthetic algae in the polar oceans, they evolved to rely on zinc for their life processes. And so the researchers say this evolution appears to have enabled these primary producers to cope with the challenging conditions of polar surface oceans. So challenging conditions, if you think about it, polar oceans, half the year, or at least for a part of the year, they're in limited sunlight. The other part of the year, they're in massive amounts of sunlight. The oceans are also very, very cold. So they're in very cold water with limited light at different times of the year. And so this is very challenging, you can think of, for anything to survive. So they came up with ways to do that. Without zinc, we would have no algae, in turn no fish, and then no other marine animals. Zinc appears to have driven the evolution of complex life in polar oceans. So it's just a fascinating thing, which is this one linchpin that is an afterthought on like our nutritional supplements, right? Oh, zinc's in my cereal. That's great. Whatever.
So I take my zinc when I feel like I'm getting sick, and that's supposed to boost my vitamin C, right? It's to help your immune system.
Yes, it's good for your immune system.
And it's good for the oceans. And then I take my Alka-Seltzer when my tummy hurts, and that's basically calcium carbonate, which is what makes all shellfish, corals, all of it.
Yep.
So I'm just consuming the building blocks of the ocean as my pharmaceuticals. That's interesting. All my over the counters.
We need all of it.
Yeah, that's it's our heritage.
Certainly.
As consumers, right?
As is the ocean. We are creatures of the sea.
Mm-hmm. Truth there. And I guess nobody knows exactly how zinc got to be the linchpin. We don't really understand the cycling of zinc in the polar surface oceans yet, but more studies to come. Zinc, vital, important. All right, but what are we missing, Blair? You want to tell us something here that
you
we're
know what's
missing out
vital or important is for your healthcare provider to tell you if there are counterindications when you are being administered a drug. This is a study from the European Society of Anesthesiology and Intensive Care, and it was specifically looking at the use of the drug Sugamadex, something like that, which is used in anesthesia. It's administered toward the end of the operation, which right before the patient is brought back, is woken up, and it reverses the action of drugs given earlier in the procedure to relax muscles. The thing is, Sugamadex.
See, I would always turn down this drug if every time my doctor tried to say it. They were like, yeah, so we're going to give you...
I can't say it.
Like,
it might have
I
been
don't feel like
the,
you know that one well enough.
massive debt and many years of schooling and
Why don't you leave the
disinterest
room,
in medicine
practice it 2 or
to
3
keep
times,
me-
and then come in and pitch it to me again. Because right now I lack confidence in this drug you can't even pronounce.
Right. So here's the thing, Justin. In most cases, they don't tell you you're getting Sugamadex. Maybe this is why. But anyway,
Sugamadex.
it's known to interact with hormones in your body, specifically progesterone, which means it reduces the effectiveness of progesterone pills, which is hormonal birth control, the combined pills, vaginal rings, implants, and IUDs. Basically, all of it that isn't condoms, essentially. As I'm probably missing, I guess, diaphragms. But anything that's like hormone-based contraceptives have impacts from this drug that I will not say again. And the current guidance is to let your patient know if it is a woman of childbearing age, WCBA.
You should.
That they have received this drug, and it increases the risk of contraceptive failure, which means those who take oral hormonal contraceptives have to follow the missed pill advice on the leaflet, which how many people keep the leaflet? You probably have to figure that out together. And then those that have contraceptives that are non-orally taken have to use non-hormonal means of contraception for 7 days following treatment.
Okay.
Yes.
Can I pause this for a sec?
Yes.
Because I was having so much fun with the name of the drug, I forgot why anybody was taking it in the beginning.
It is part of anesthetics.
Okay, so they're gonna put you out. You're gonna have a tooth removed or a kidney replaced,
or emergency surgery, or elective surgery, or any number of things.
Right. But then the next day, you're still healthy enough to have sex.
Yes.
And your birth control is not working because this drug is interfering with the hormones.
Exactly.
Or how about this? Maybe you had sex right before you got into an accident.
That could be how the accident happened.
Surgery.
It could be a sex-related accident.
Okay? Humans have sex. These things can happen.
Sometimes people get hurt. They need to
so,
go to the hospital.
so this means that this is really important. So researchers administered a 7-question survey to all anesthesiologists, about 150 professionals. I can't do it today. I got 3-syllable words only today.
Blair's mouth is not working today.
No, it's not. It's fine. You know what I'm talking about. So 150 professionals took this survey. 94% of the doctors that responded, the practitioners, said they were aware of the risk of contraceptive failure. 94%. So not 100%, but very high. 70%.
Almost all of them.
70% said they do not routinely discuss this drug with the patients who receive it. 70%. So then they took a survey of 234 patients who were administered this drug during the 6 weeks covered by this audit. 28% of the patients given this drug were of childbearing age, and 48 of these should have received advice. That means the other 17 had medical history that meant they weren't at risk of pregnancy. Any number of reasons, right? But so 48 of these people could have had an accidental pregnancy because of contraceptive failure. But there was no...
That they would have never known about, and they wouldn't have known why their contraceptive failed, and they would have been like, oh, what? Wait. Yeah.
There was no record on any of the 48 charts that they were talked to about it. No record at all.
So were there any pregnancies?
They did not follow this to that level. They were just looking at this survey to see, are doctors talking to them about it, okay? And so in response to the findings, the authors created a patient information leaflet, sure, and letters, sure, but they're programmed to the electronic patient record system to identify quote-unquote at-risk patients and deliver electronic prompts to the practitioners caring for them to talk to them about it. So it's kind of like, I know I've seen it.
It's like a notification to their tablet as they're going around and making their rounds. Oh, Miss Blair, we must inform you. It says here that Sugar Mama Dex is going to make you a sugar mama.
Yes. So this is the thing, right? It's like I've seen a point of sale system at stores that say like, have you smiled? Did you ask them how their day was? Like, we're having to do this now with these practitioners. I don't know if this is because it just doesn't occur to them. I don't know if this is because it's a delicate subject they don't want to bring up. I don't know what's going on.
They just have a lot to think about.
Well,
but ultimately, this is a problem for a couple reasons. The main one that I'm thinking of is that we now are in a situation in the United States where this mistake could cause someone to carry an unwanted pregnancy.
Yeah, okay, that brings it home. Yep.
So this was the thing where I read this and I went, oh no.
Yeah, okay.
This is a big problem because it adds a whole extra level of danger there. Which is really
responsibility.
Scary.
Yeah, and who's responsible in that case? Yeah.
And here's the thing. I think you've kind of pinpointed the thing with that smile and all the information you're supposed to say. If you go to a pharmacy, and you buy something from a pharmacist, you buy it over here, and then you scoot down to the counter, you pay over it, scoot down, and then somebody sits there and like reads you half of the indications and warnings. Is like, hey, if you do this, if you drive, if you don't, whatever it is, don't stand on your head for the next 24 hours while you're taking this. Otherwise, you'll get really dizzy. And they read you all this stuff. But if you get one of those anesthesiologists, they're more like, well, you're going to feel a warm and tingly feeling, and then you're going to sleep. And that's kind of where they leave it. They don't go into a whole lot of details about what they're giving you. They're just knocking you out and they're moving on. So I wonder if they have to like adopt the same sort of, just get the pharmacist, call them up from the pharmacy and have them come up to the operating room and give you the little spiel before they put you out. But if it's an emergency, who's got time?
It's the tough thing is
you tell people after the fact.
Yeah,
or
you
tell
them
hey,
when you're talking about
from here on out. Yeah,
exactly. And
it needs to be in there somewhere.
I feel like people are going to think that's a lie. If your anesthesiologist is telling you, sometimes this drug leads to people being pregnant, you're going to be like, what just happened while I was unconscious?
Yikes, I hate that, Justin. No, thank you.
It's not fun.
So gross.
That's probably why they're not saying anything.
That's not why. But ultimately, the thing is, this is a reminder to all humans who are of childbearing age who could bear children.
Yeah.
To ask questions, no matter how insane it sounds when you're being prescribed something or you're going through a medical treatment. I guess you gotta ask every time. You have to be your own
any
advocate.
Contraindications?
And
Will
you
anything
have to be very
given
specific.
interact
I am
with
on
anything?
hormonal birth control. How does this impact this treatment?
Yeah.
Because I know as like a 20-something, I didn't know that antibiotics was a counterindication for, or had interactions with hormonal birth control. I didn't know that. I found that out after the fact, freaked out. Everything was fine. But ultimately, that was something that I didn't get told when I was prescribed the antibiotics, because I'm just expected to figure that out on my own. This is a really good opportunity to say, ask every time, because the body is a system and things are connected that you could never think are connected. You got to be your own advocate, which is a bummer, but here we are. me off?
Now, this is a sound of anesthesia working on a patient.
This is a sound of
Usually
chlorophyll.
Oh.
And this is This Week in Science. Thank you so much for joining us for another fun-filled science episode focused on the oceans. If you're loving what we're doing right now, give us a like. And if you like us enough to give us a like, tell a friend and bring a friend next week. We are canceling COVID this week. We're not going to talk about any COVID news. So it is time to play us directly into that part of the show, which this week is all about these oceans and what lives in them. It's time for Blair's Animal Corner.
With Blair.
She loves our creatures, great and small. Biped, millipede, no pet at all. If you want to hear about animals, she's your girl. Except for giant pandas and squirrels. There's Animal Corner.
What you got, Blair?
It's a World Oceans Day. Blair's Animal Corner. I'm going to start by telling you all about ugly fish and how they need our help.
I love ugly fish. I like all the ugly things.
If you love them, are they still ugly? I guess probably, huh? Anyway, according to a machine learning study, they are. This is from the University of Montpellier, France. Pronounce that. They asked 13,000 members of the public to rate the aesthetic attractiveness of 481 photographs of ray-finned fishes in an online survey. Then they used that data to train a neural network. Then they used that neural network to generate predictions for additional 4,400 photographs featuring 2,417 of the most encountered reef fish species to label them as ugly or not. So the neural network decided if the fish was ugly or not. What they found was that
we totally trust neural networks.
Oh, sure.
To be unbiased in these kinds of things. But yeah, okay.
Sure, it's fine. Bright, colorful fish with rounder bodies tended to be rated as the most beautiful. Species that were ranked as more attractive also tended to be less distinctive in terms of their ecological traits and evolutionary history. So a really kind of more uniform group were considered pretty fish. They all kind of had similar ecological roles. Species listed on the IUCN Red List as threatened or whose conservation status has not yet been evaluated, which just means they're really rare, so they haven't been able to address that, had lower aesthetic values on average. So that means there was a mismatch between aesthetic value, ecological function, and extinction vulnerability. The pretty fish were the ones that don't need our help, and the ugly fish were the ones who do, both by the number of them left and by how important they were to their ecosystem.
Interesting.
So that also means that it is likely that the species most in need of public support are least likely to receive them.
Are the pretty ones, I mean, when I think of like the pretty fish, I think of the ones that are living in the coral reefs, and they're the ones that we have all the videos of, and so they're the ones that the tourists are looking at. But when it comes to like fishing, we're fishing for the quote unquote ugly species.
Yes. And so that's another really important part, is that those that are most important to humans in fisheries also are considered more ugly. So that means that generally the fish that are more important, yes, rockfish, a lot of trout. Yeah, I think you can look at trout and salmon, and they are very pretty in certain lights, but they are not considered as pretty as, for example, clownfish or surgeonfish.
Unless you're hungry. Well,
you're a pretty good-looking fish to eat.
Yeah.
So I mean, okay, I am befuddled and bemused that they have an attractiveness scale as any of this. But we're talking about uniformity amongst fish that are surviving, and a more diverse style of fish is the one that is struggling, generally speaking.
But also more important ecologically.
Okay. Huh.
which would indicate that
Well-
prior to humans, that probably was not the case.
Yep.
But I guess if you have a bunch of fish who are structurally similar, they might also have similar diet or similar habitat or similarness. And so if there's enough of those to fill the niches, then yeah, they're not as important.
So, I mean, the problem with this is that it only looked at reef fish. And the coral reef in general is an endangered habitat.
Okay.
So it kind of impacts the scale of this study in any broad niche-based conversations we could have, like the one that you're talking about. It's kind of limited because they focused on reefs. If we looked at the ocean as a whole, I'd agree with you. There could be some more conclusions we could draw. But ultimately, what this means is that there is a mismatch in the inherent value and the actual ecological value. This is common in conservation.
It's the panda principle.
Panda v snake, right?
Yeah.
Panda v spider, panda v shark. All those situations.
Landmark case.
Yeah.
Shark.
It's considered cuter, more attractive, what have you. But you also think about how humans are hardwired, and there's a weird aspect of this where all of the quote unquote like beautiful fish look very similar. You could probably look at some weird human nature-y things about that in relation to human beauty standards too. It's interesting. I don't know. But
Humans
ultimately
want to be birds.
yes.
We like the pretty feathered birds. We like
Yes.
the nice colors. We wish we had
Mhm.
all that.
Yeah. But so this World Oceans Day gives some love to the ugly fishes. That's all I ask.
I will, Blair.
Yeah.
Thank
You know who loves fishes of all types?
Who?
Otters. They like to eat
Oh.
them.
They ought to eat them. Yeah.
Mhm. University of Exeter wanted to look at Asian short-clawed otters and how they learn things from each other. They gave them puzzle boxes containing familiar food, and then they gave them unfamiliar natural prey. The meat inside, which was protected by hard outer shells. So there's two very different, distinct scenarios. You're used to the food inside, but I want you to solve a puzzle to get to it. And then here is a novel food source in a novel puzzle, but it is natural, so we can mimic what would happen in the wild, right? The otters watched each other to decide whether food was safe and desirable. So they would watch one otter eat and go, okay, that looks doable. That looks delicious. I'm going in. But they would not copy the problem-solving skills from the otter they observed. They would use their own wits, not the example of others, to figure out how to extract the items from the protection. So basically what this means is that they have social learning, but that it's limited in its nature. They gave them 5 variations of a puzzle box, each with a meatball, which was their familiar food. The method to extract the food varied in each version. And the natural prey were rainbow trout as a control. They're not hard on the outside. And then shore crabs and blue mussels. There were 20 otters in the study. 11 managed to extract the meat from all 3 types of natural prey. But they showed that they could learn how to do it. What really is interesting is that for conservation, if you want to release an Asian small-clawed otter, if you teach them to eat specific prey in the wild via another otter, they will take that up, take it out into the wild, and most likely other otters will follow suit. So if you want to teach otters to eat a new prey because their old prey is depleted, for example, you can do that. But you're not going to be able to teach them how to do it. They have to figure that out on their own. Yeah.
So it's really interesting that they mix it and they're not just learning everything from other otters. They're like, I got to do some stuff by myself.
Yeah.
I'm going to work through this so that I know how to do it, but I can also watch you over there and get some ideas.
Yeah. And, there's probably something to be said about the fact that they're carnivores, they're hunters. They also compete over territory, and they have quite the tool set. They have amazing teeth and claws. And so they have to use all that to stay kind of evolutionarily fit. So maybe it's a weird way to keep their skills kind of up throughout this so that they don't get kind of, used to the same thing. I don't know.
Well, yeah, it's also I mean, having that kind of there's learning from others, but then, so that habits can get passed down, but that it's not just habit and it's not just only learned. You can actually have flexibility to new situations.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so when something arises that the habit doesn't fit, there's that resilience built into the system.
Yeah, and weasels really are. Otters are in the weasel family, and they're very good. They're generalists. They will eat anything they can catch, pretty much. So,
including humans.
yes, true. Anyway,
I see.
last I want to talk about the unsung hero of the ocean, Kelp.
Let's sing it.
How do you sing about Kelp?
I think Kiki played it earlier. I think that was the.
We go, Kelp. Anyway,
Kelp. I need somebody. Kelp.
One.
Not just anybody.
You got it. That is the one. Geniuses.
Sorry.
Anyway.
Not sorry.
Kelp. They can help with ocean acidification. They can kelp with ocean acidification. They make sense. They're photosynthesizing, so they convert carbon dioxide to oxygen. So the more kelp there is, the better for the ocean it is. What this study from the Stony Brook University School of Marine and Atmospheric Sciences tells us is that the presence of kelp significantly reduces ocean acidification nearby, which actually has a direct impact on bivalves like clams and oysters. So all three of these things, kelp, clams, and oysters, are aquaculture items. So this study shows essentially that by diversifying aquaculture, you can help your own crop by protecting the shell fisheries from ocean acidification. And of course, it offers a second crop that you can harvest and sell as well. So the kelp that they looked at is actually called sugar kelp is the common name for it, and that's used in food. It's not like nori or seaweed, but it's used as ingredients in foods like soups and other processed foods.
That's where we get things like carrageenan.
Mm-hmm. And it's a sugar alternative too. So yeah. Anyway,
yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's a thickener. Yep, you're totally right. And so the kelp in oyster farms has a direct impact on the bivalves that are directly in and around that kelp. The ones just a little bit farther away had larger impacts from ocean acidification. So this is a real strong. They did it in the lab first, and then they tested it out in real aquaculture facilities. And so it's a great proof of concept that the kelp really has a positive impact on the environment. And algae all over the ocean have a huge impact because they're the primary producers. So they're like the trees of the ocean. And so their impact, they reduce ocean acidification, they feed the primary consumers, who then feed the secondary consumers, and right? Your food web. But this is proof that protecting kelp protects the oceans. And one of the things I thought about recently was the sea otters. Speaking of otters in Monterey, and how when the sea otters were hunted out, it actually destroyed the kelp forests, because without sea otters to eat the urchins overate the kelp, and then the kelp kind of collapsed, and that changed the landscape. And so we called the sea otters the keystone species, but in a way, you could look further down the line and say the kelp was, right? Because the kelp was creating an environment and
the entire ecosystem,
the direct chemistry of the ocean around it.
There was a story from a couple of weeks ago that I don't think anybody brought, but it was about I think it might have been Lake Michigan or something. They have this plan to get rid of a lot of the algae, clear up the water, And then they've done some modeling and said, yeah, actually, these like terrible cyanobacteria will take over the lake. It'll become you'll get rid of the toxic algae, with
But
toxic bacteria will take its place because it's been
yeah.
keeping it down. So, boy, when you mess with a biome in any way that's been established, you really don't know what you're doing.
Right. But it's the cool thing about this is just like when you think about farming crops on land, crop rotation is important, diversification is important, because you don't want to deplete resources, and you don't want to have all these kind of detrimental impacts of monoculture. The same is true for aquaculture, and this is a really good proof of that you want to have diversification of your crops in aquaculture as well, for a bunch of reasons, but this is a really big one. If we promoted the growing of kelp in aquaculture as a general rule, no matter what type of fish or shellfish was being raised in that area, it could clean the water and reduce ocean acidification from the
it might
processes going
actually,
on.
for a lot of fish species, I mean, not necessarily the ones where they aquaculture them out in open ocean, but if you're doing aquaculture in shore areas that have a lot of that wouldn't normally have kelp, these species that are there are probably going to feel safer. They'll have lower stress hormones. They might experience fewer behavioral disruptions and have a whole different way of interacting with each other if you have a more naturalistic environment for that aquaculture.
That is a really good point I didn't even think about. Yes. So that's, absolutely. So this is a good reminder that, we're in an open system. It's not a closed system. Even when you do aquaculture out on land, that water has to go somewhere. So if you can reduce acidification in that water, whether it's part of an open system or a closed system, that's going to impact the world as a whole. So more kelp.
Kelp, the oceans.
With kelp.
Dun, dun, dun.
That was Justin's brain on interpretive dance.
This is This Week in Science. If you are enjoying the show, and I hope that you are, please head over to TWIS.org and click on the Patreon link. Head over there to support us in an ongoing fashion to keep this show going. Our listeners do support us and keep us doing this show every week. It's really you, the listener, who makes this show possible through your support on Patreon. $10 a month and more. We will thank you by name at the end of the show. And if you're not interested in Patreon, just remember we do have Zazzle as well. There's a lot of cool merchandise out there, TWIS t-shirts and other things that proceeds go to help the show. So all of that, we really thank you, because we can't do this without you. Thank you for your support. All right, Justin, you got some stories for us?
Yeah, there's a new paper in the Quarterly Journal of Economics, which is not the sort of thing I normally pay very close attention to. This is published by Oxford University Press. They found that taking away welfare from children when they reach the age of 18 greatly increases the chances that they will face criminal justice charges in subsequent years. So there's supplemental security income in the United States, is a program that would provide payments, or does provide payments, to people with disabilities who have low income. These are children qualify for the program based on their disability status and their parents' low income and assets. Until 1996, when there was a conservative resurgence of political power in the United States, children automatically continued to qualify for the adult program when they turned 18. 1996, they phased that out. So when you turned 18, they used the adult model, which was, I guess, more restrictive, and about 40% of children who had been receiving benefits when they turned 18 no longer were. So by comparing records of these children in the differing outcomes, they found that there was an increase of 20% number of criminal charges over the next 2 decades and an annual likelihood of incarceration of 60%. Pretty amazingly high. And most of the crimes that these kids would end up getting into had to do with what's called income generating crimes, things like theft, burglary, fraud, forgery, and prostitution. And again, these are children who, from the outset, had conditions, mental and behavioral conditions, that qualified them for these programs. So what the economists did here was they looked at what did it cost in the increased crime and the increased incarceration versus having just given them the supplemental income. Turns out, if you just look at the cost of the crime, the courts, the policing, and the incarceration, it's about the same. But then you're not including all of the other things like, well, if they had a better start and were getting jobs and paying taxes, they would have actually been adding to, as not opposed to it. So if the outcome is you want less taxes and more efficient government, better outcomes for individuals, lower crime rates, better jobs, better pay, better economic status, allowing young people with disabilities a safety net, that could be part of your solution. It's one of those weird.
Yeah, it sounds like a pretty easy solution. I mean, but it's the whole part of, in the United States, people have been arguing against welfare. You don't want the nanny state. But this kind of data does
Sure.
go to help support how support can keep people from going down the path of crime, because it maintains their ability to do the things that, they don't feel like you don't feel like you need to do crime, right?
Well, there's that. And
I
there's
can
also,
feed my family. I
there's
have
also
rent.
some of the things that aren't in this study. And it just as for instance, whether you're talking about general assistance, welfares, specific ones like the SSI supplements like this, food stamps, 100% of the money that you put towards that as your government and your community stay very local to where those dollars are spent.
Yeah.
Those are staying here. If you give a corporation a tax incentive thing or whatever, and they're going to build a bigger factory overseas, none of that money is coming. None of that is helping anybody. Any of these general assistance, and then say you even buy into the Kool-Aid that there's some people who just don't want to work and are willing to live on that safety net money, that bare minimum amount of money. Fine. That's less people in the workforce. You know what that means? More job opportunities for you out there wanting to work. And it means you're probably going to be able to get a better income because there's less people who are just taking any job to survive and are willing to be paid anything because they absolutely need it just not to die. Right? Like there's benefits beyond even just the peripheral. But this is disabled children turning into young adults and getting cut off by the safety net. That's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. Anyway.
But even from the basic argument that maintaining welfare as these people go into adulthood, maintaining welfare reduces crime.
Yeah. There you go.
So if people would like less crime in your local area, welfare programs help with that.
I don't want to pay for it. You're going to pay for it.
That's the conclusion I'm taking from this.
See, that sounds like a very obvious path forward.
Lower crime and lower taxes. They'll go hand in hand to a better society. So that leads me to my next story, which is what you believe in might kill you quicker.
Oh no!
What you believe actually politically determines when you will die. The political landscape is full of issues. We've got or at least concepts that are called issues. Usually they're not actually the issues. They're not having nothing to do with policy. They're more things that people have been coerced to be for or against without having to look any further into it. Often these concepts are built to generate donor engagement. While there may actually be issue of policy somewhere down the line in the rabbit hole somewhere, politics is often not seen very clearly in terms of the outcomes, like we were talking about just now, about the outcomes of the government shutting down a welfare program and then ending up paying for it anyway, right? If you just look at outcomes, which is what we should be doing, we should ignore all rhetoric. Whenever they've got politicians on there talking about a policy, they should ignore everything that they're saying and look at the outcomes of when those policies have been in place before. We have had plenty of time to do this. So this could be a conversation about guns. States with least gun regulation have the most gun deaths. So if you're talking about safety, you should say, I'm against safety. That's why I'm against gun regulation. It could be social safety nets, which we were just talking about. It could be about wealth inequality, education, worker safety, any number of issues. But this is a study.
Climate change.
Climate change, absolutely. This is a recent study that looked at one outcome, mortality, and correlated it with red and blue voting leaning counties. Conservative versus liberal, Democrat versus Republican. It's a 20-year study. It looked at that correlation. Found that between 2001 and 2019, mortality rates decreased by 22% in Democratic counties. In that
That's
same time frame, that's significant. And they decreased in Republican counties too by 11%. That's a 50% more decrease in death in blue counties nationwide. So that's sort of interesting. From the beginning to the end, though, there seems to be an increase in this thing. From the beginning to the end, the gap between them increased 541%.
What?
Yeah. So they started actually 20 years ago. They weren't that far apart. The red government-controlled areas, the blue controlled areas. Some of the things that we've added since then, like the Affordable Care Act, have been rejected and not implemented in some of those red communities.
But they have impacted health coverage and so mortality in places that have enacted it. Yeah.
And that's one of the things. There's a bunch of factors involved. So if we're looking for, so we have this better technology, we're curing diseases, all the things we're getting more and more access to. It's happening at half the rate. That those increases in decreasing mortality, the decreases in mortality are happening at half the rate in red controlled areas. So which, if your politics and policies or outcomes, is that you can say this: there's widespread support amongst Republican-leaning American communities for heart disease, cancer, chronic lung disease, diabetes, influenza, pneumonia, kidney disease, drug overdose, and suicide. That's what they're for. That's what those policies that they're... So I can understand then why some of those communities might be very anti-government if they don't believe in their government, because it's having terrible outcomes for them locally.
This is correlation, I will say.
Yes.
Yeah, they didn't go into causation in this study. They looked at correlation.
It's interesting, and I think it's worth talking about, but I do just want to call out the fact that it is correlation. So there could be other confounding variables. Like red states might be more likely to have other problems, or red counties, excuse me, that could impact mortality.
Hey, yeah, you know what? That's true, because a lot of those states also have less restrictive gun laws and much higher rates of gun death. That's true.
There are many factors that can go there. There are many factors that go into these kinds of things, for sure. I think the point that you brought up, the American Care Act, the ACA, being enacted in various places, that probably has had a major impact, especially in that time period and toward the end of that time period significantly. It is good that they stopped measuring it after 2019, though, because the pandemic, those years kind of throw everything into the...
Well, you'd have to do a specific COVID study on those same parameters, right? You can't lump that in with everything else. You'd find probably similar results.
But I do also wonder if it is the ideological attacks on science that are making it people dismiss advice from their doctors. I'm wondering if it is the amount of private private hospitals versus public health programs.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
like
there's
all
also an issue,
all of it
Justin, with
plays
A lot of
in.
issues.
red states and red counties often being more rural, and so healthcare is
So-
usually farther away.
And they did look at this, and actually, of the red counties, the more rural they were, the worse the health outcomes were.
Right.
They were actually the
Which
worst.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Mhm. We don't want it to make sense, but it does make sense. Yeah.
I
Unfortunately.
guess. But this was also a way of doing sort of a broad look at it, because it would be, if you tried to point to just the amount of red meat being served in a diner on a given, like drilling down on this will take some time. But there's a pretty clear pattern. Mortality rates are higher under Republican government.
Well, moving away from mortality rates and political beliefs, I'm going to take us into the land of our guts. Taking us to our. I've got guts. I'm going to take us into our guts right now. Okay. Researchers just published in Cell Host and Microbe their study of some metabolites. These are metabolic products of bacteria in the gut. They started this understanding that in the microbiome of humans in the intestines, there's an increase as people age with a certain type of bacteria called Ruminococcacea. Ruminococcacea. I think I got close there. Anyway, it increases and it creates an isoamylamine, IAA. That's its metabolite. This is the thing that it produces. And in elderly people, because there's more of the Ruminococcacea, you have more of the IAAA. And I was like, what's going on there? We know that some things can affect the brain from the gut. And oh, look, IAAA can cross the blood-brain barrier. So what could it possibly be doing in the brain? Well, they couldn't do all the stuff in the human brain, so this is where they took it to mice. And they looked to see what happened when they grew cultures of neuronal cells and put IAAA in it and what happened. And they're like, oh, IAAA binds a promoter region. This is the part of a gene that tells it to get transcribed. So it makes a gene active and makes it turn into a protein if it's going to get translated. So when IAAA binds to a particular promoter region in a gene for the P53 regulator, what ends up happening is instructions to cause cell death get printed in the brain's neurons. And so what they discovered is that when they gave IAAA and fed it to mice, those mice had cognitive decline. The IAAA is going from the gut into the brain, telling the brain cells to kill themselves, and then a cognitive decline occurs. They used a compound to block the IAAA in the gut of the mice, and it blocked the cognitive decline. So now I want whatever that compound is in my breakfast cereal. But it is a fascinating study because they've taken this whole pathway from basic the metabolite in the gut into the brain and pinned it to actually leading to programmed cell death of neurons. So things in our gut, as we get older, the bacteria, old people gut, get bacteria that make bad stuff, travels to the brain, kills the brain. We go, bleh. I don't like that.
No, we don't want that. Let's make
I don't
that
want,
stop.
but the cognitive decline was only in mice. It wasn't in people. So it maybe doesn't work the same way in people, but it probably does.
I don't know. I feel like that happens when I have eat 2 double doubles from In-N-Out, like back to back. I feel like something from my gut that's like trying to kill my brain so it doesn't happen again.
It's very possible. It's like, don't ever do this again.
My brain is like, oh, that was good. But then I can't move for a little while.
Yeah. But anyway, we now potentially have a target because we know this metabolite. We can either target the bacteria themselves, we can target the metabolite in our guts before it hits the blood-brain barrier. Two potential targets that could potentially benefit the aging brain. So this could lead good places. Blair, who wants to be living forever.
Yeah. Does this mean that a transplant would help or no? Fecal transplant?
Oh, maybe. The question is, would the fecal transplant fix whatever problems are leading to the change in the bacterial composition in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Like, would that just be short term, or would it be a long term thing? Yeah.
Yeah, it might just not be generating the IAA, whatever it was getting up there and doing the bad stuff.
So I would just have to do a wipe. I'd have to go on an intense course of antibiotics and take a poo pill. Like,
not just any poo pill.
Like every
Dr. Justin's not a real doctor of poo pills.
6 months? That sounds doable, right? That sounds terrible.
Sounds terrible.
I think you could do it about the same length of doing an antibiotic. I think it's like a 10-day program.
Yeah, but you have to do it over and over again to prevent your gut
I don't know.
I
I don't know, because it's not like if you knock out your native population and then filled it up with somebody else's native population,
it'll still age.
It'll still age.
I mean, but if it's the gut lining, the gaps between the cells leading to leaky gut, and other, there are certain things that change as you get older that aren't necessarily because of the microbial population. It's all things. It's a system, Blair. It's a systems question. Yes, it is. Okay.
Indeed.
Well, let's get away from our guts. Have you ever thought about Fungeyes?
Yes.
I mean, eyes on funguses.
Oh,
like fungus with eyes.
No.
That I have not.
Right? Whoever thinks of a mushroom or, with eyes? No.
Well, they can sense light, right? Can't fungus sense light?
Yes. So many fungus species are capable of sensing light. This is very helpful to them because they are then able to sense where photosynthetic organisms that they end up feeding on, the detritus that's left over from those photosynthetic organisms. So the fungus being able to sense light, it's very ecologically important for it to be able to do that. But the question is, how long ago did these abilities start? Well, some researchers just publishing in Current Biology published their study, A Light Sensing System in the Common Ancestor of the Fungi. They were specifically looking at a particular system that they've discovered in one zoosporic fungus that's called Blastocladiella emersonii. Now, this Blastocladiella, it has an eye spot-like organelle. So it's got lipids and it's got fatty, kind of fatty tissue. And this is a very different light-sensing organ. But it's like this fungus basically has an eye spot. It's not just light sensing all over. It has an eye spot. And this eye spot is called the cyclop. See what they did there, scientists? Oh,
yeah,
scientists.
Yeah.
Yes. Anyway, the cyclop protein in this particular fungus, they're like, oh, did this just arise on its own? Or is this something that, where'd it come from? Anyway, so they did a big comparison with a whole bunch of different fungal species, and they determined that it's not just because this one species is the only species we've found with an eye spot. The common ancestor of all funguses had all the genes necessary for eye spots. So all funguses could potentially have eyes, but they don't. Why don't all funguses have eyes? This should now be the question.
Well, it's because a long time ago, the great-great-great-grandpapa fungus. Looked around, but it was before there was anything else to look at. So he said, what do I need these things for?
Nothing to look at. I'm in the
Nothing
dirt.
to see here.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. A lot of funguses, the only time you see them is when they pop out into the light. Many of them are in the dark. So having an eye spot for many funguses isn't necessarily appropriate. Yeah. But anyway, eyes. It could have happened on funguses. Coulda. And then my final study, because I got to give us some really fun, good news to go out on this 90-minute episode. So you know how the Earth's magnetic poles are supposed to be flipping?
Yeah.
And we've heard lots and lots of stories over the last,
Sure.
20 years that we've been doing the show that scientists are like, the Earth's poles, they're reversing. We're going to have a pole switch, pole flip-flop.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, new study out of the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences looking at a bunch of data going back about 9,000 years. They go, nope. I think that all of the magnetic anomalies that we're seeing in the South Atlantic right now that have been making everybody go, woo, woo, magnetic flip-flop, it's coming. They said no, that these anomalies, quote unquote, are normal. We're just noticing
More like
them.
anomalies.
Yeah, it's also
Blair.
well, also the magnetic flipping thing does happen, but isn't it like it happens
Every
couple
200,000
years? Like,
200,000, yeah.
Every 200,000 years. Okay. So, I mean,
But it's not completely regular. It does happen, and it could happen, but what these researchers are saying
wobbly.
is that the evidence that people are using to say that a flip is coming is not necessarily evidence that a flip is coming. Okay. That it's kind of normal for that area of the South Atlantic. Looking at the data that they've seen, yes, Blair, anomalies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You're welcome.
I'll never sell those reverse compasses now.
No. But they predict that if we're around for the next 300 years, we will see that the South Atlantic anomaly will probably disappear. This is their conclusion. So we only have this hypothesis, this new conclusion that's now a hypothesis that we have to wait to observe. We have to wait 300 years. So patience on this one for TWIS to be reporting on it 300 years.
Oh, yeah. What would that be? That'd be like episode 15,000.
Episode, how did we go this long? We must have discovered the secret of longevity. Blair, you will live forever if that's the case. Did we make it to the end?
We did.
Did we do it? Did we get here?
I think we're there.
Should I play more ocean music for Justin?
No. Don't need it.
Yes.
It was such a
Give me one more.
I don't need it.
pained look on your face.
Give me one more.
You want? We just want one more. That's all, right? Just one more. Yes. One more. How about? Oh wait, did we see? We already did this one, didn't we? Let's go back to the Bering Sea.
Oh sure.
Utter nonsense. Complete and total nonsense.
Shout out to Fada. Thank you so much for your help with social media and show notes and all of the good stuff. And yes, the descriptions on YouTube. Gord and Identity4 and Arnlore and others, thanks for keeping the chat rooms a happy, wonderful place to be. Identity4, thank you for recording the show. Rachel, thank you for your editing and other amazing assistance. And yes, thank you to our Patreon sponsors. Thank you, Teresa Smith, James Schaefer, Richard Badge, Kent Northcote, Rick Loveman, Pierre Velazar, Ralphie Figueroa, John Ratnaswamy, Carl Kornfeld, Karen Tozzi, Woody MS, Chris Wozniak, Dave Bunn, Vigard, Chef Dad, Hal Snyder, Donathan Stiles, a.k.a. Don Stylo, John Lee, Ali Coffin, Gaurav Sharma, Reagan, Derek Schmidt, Don Mundis, Stephen Alberon, Daryl Myshak, Stu Pollock, Andrew Swanson. Did I just read the same names over and over again? Anyway, I'm going. Fred S104, Sky Luke, Paul Runovich, Kevin Bruden, Noodles, Jack, Brian Carrington, Matt Bass, Vote Beto for Texas, John McKee, Greg Riley, Mark Hessenflow, Gene Tellier, Steve Leisman, a.k.a. Zima, Ken Hayes, Howard Tan, Christopher Rampin, Dana Pearson, Richard Brendan Minish, Johnny Gridley, Remy Day, Flying Out, Christopher Dreyer, Artyom, Greg Briggs, John Atwood, Rudy Garcia, Dave Wilkinson, Rondi Lewis, Paul, Philip Shane, Kurt Larson, Stu Doster, Jason Olds, Dave Neighbor, Eric Knapp, E.O., Kevin Parachan, Aaron Luthen, Steve Bell, Bob Calder, Marjorie, Paul Disney, David Simmerly, Patrick Peccarower, Tony Steele, and Jason Roberts. Thank you for all of your support on Patreon. Now it's just going to be Blair. Wow. On next
I'm going to start making random eyeball movements based on a
no. Okay.
an image of a distant pulsar caught in a radio telescope.
If you love eyeball improvisational dance and us reporting on science, you can support us. Find information about that at TWIS.org. Click on Patreon link. On next week's show.
We will be back Wednesday, 8 p.m. Pacific Time, broadcasting live from our YouTube and Facebook channels, as well as twist.org/live.
Hey, do you want to listen to us as a podcast while you interpret the mathematical patterns of the ocean or the rainforests or the clouds? Just search for This Week in Science wherever podcasts are found. If you enjoyed the show, get your friends to subscribe as well.
For more information on anything you've heard here today, stories and links to them are available on our website, www.twist.org, where you can also sign up for a bi-decadal newsletter.
Hey, man, you just got to follow the flow of when the newsletter comes to you, you know?
It's not going to blow up your inbox.
You can contact us directly instead. You can email Kiki at Kirsten@thisweekinscience.com, Justin at twistminion@gmail.com, or me, Blair, at blairbaz@twist.org. Just be sure to put TWIS, TWIS, in the subject line or your email. It'll get caught into that cosmic flow of sound and experience and movement.
Definitely not an ugly fish.
All complaints about the show should be sent to us via Twitter, where we are at Twist Science, at Dr. Kiki, at Jacksonfly, and at Blair's Menagerie. We love your feedback. If there's a topic you'd like us to cover or address, a suggestion for an interview, a haiku that comes to you in the night, please let us know.
We'll be back here next week, and we hope you'll join us again for more great science news.
And if you've learned anything on the show, remember,
it's all in your head.
This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science, it's the end of the world. So I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. 'Cause this week's science is coming your way. So everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth, and I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in 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 Science.